Today we're going to talk about quantum computing. At Wall Street Millennial, we don't have PhDs in quantum mechanics, and neither do most people. Typically, something as exotic as quantum computing wouldn't be on the average person's radar. But with quantum computing companies now listed on stock exchanges, raising hundreds of millions of dollars from the public, the conversation has shifted. These companies claim their quantum technology will change the world, promising everything from a cure to cancer to solutions for climate change. Many in the media are breathlessly amplifying these claims, hyping up quantum as a magical new technology on the verge of revolutionizing everything. Optimism around new technologies is natural, but there's a catch. To date, quantum computers have yet to deliver any practical results. Quantum companies, along with their shills in the media, insist that a breakthrough is just around the corner, forecasting an economic revolution in the next few years. But this isn't a new story. Researchers have been making similar promises since the late 1990s. In this video, we'll examine the quantum computing hype cycle and explore why quantum might just be Silicon Valley's longest-running hoax. In a classical computer, bits are binary, meaning that they can be either on or off. You can think of it as zeros and ones. The binary state is controlled by transistors that very precisely turn bits on or off, leading to consistent and reliable outputs. For example, when you put 1 plus 1 into a calculator, you know with certainty that the result will be 2. A quantum computer has something called quantum bits, or qubits. Unlike a bit, which is either 0 or 1, a qubit can be both 0 and 1 simultaneously, due to a property called superposition. This means that while the qubit is in superposition, it represents a blend of 0 and 1. But once you measure it, the qubit collapses to either 0 or 1 with certain probabilities. To manipulate a qubit, we don't simply turn it on or off. Instead, we change the probabilities that will be observed as 0 or 1 when measured. So while a classical bit is like a light switch that can be turned on or off, a qubit is more like a dimmer switch, where you can adjust it to any position between fully on or fully off, adjusting the brightness to control its state probabilities. Various methods like laser pulses or magnetic fields are used to carefully control these probabilities. Due to the inherent unpredictability of quantum mechanics, running a quantum algorithm will yield different outputs each time for the same input. Quantum algorithms are designed to account for this by running multiple trials, so the answer emerges statistically rather than from a single deterministic result. To solve complex problems, you need many bits. For example, when you're playing a video game, the computer needs to crunch a lot of zeros and ones to calculate the physics of the game, render the graphics, etc. Modern computers have billions of bits controlled by microscopic transistors. Similarly, the more qubits you add to a quantum computer, the more complex problems it can theoretically solve. Today, IBM, which is considered to be one of the leaders in quantum computing, has a computer with 1,121 qubits. That is less than a rounding error compared to the billions of transistors in a classical computer. However, in theory, you don't need as many qubits in a quantum computer as you need transistors in a classical computer. Because each qubit exists in a state of superposition, when combined, the number of states the qubits can represent at one time increases exponentially. For example, 1 qubit can only take on 2 states at one time. With 2 qubits, there are 4 possible permutations. All 4 states can exist at the same time. With 3 qubits, there are 8 possible states, and so on. The number of possible states the quantum computer can represent at the same time is 2 to the power of the number of qubits. Due to this exponential nature, you can see that as the number of qubits increases, the number of possible states becomes astronomical. There are a few different methods to control the qubits. Google and IBM use superconducting qubits. They use microwave pulses to manipulate the qubits. Superconducting qubits must be kept at extremely low temperatures, as even a small amount of heat can disrupt their state. There are other methods as well. For example, the company IonQ uses trapped ion technology. Ions are held in place by magnetic fields and manipulated by lasers. There are many other methods to control qubits. In the United States alone, there are 72 quantum computing startups, which have collectively raised billions of dollars from venture capitalists. Many of them have developed novel methods to control qubits, but to date, all methods require the qubits to be placed in extremely controlled environments to avoid disruption from outside noise. Scaling up the number of qubits introduces further challenges, especially due to quantum entanglement. In an entangled system, the state of each qubit depends on the state of other qubits, creating an interdependent network. For the system to function as intended, the probabilistic state of each qubit must be precisely controlled. However, if even a single qubit is disturbed by environmental noise, it can compromise the entire computation. As the number of qubits grows, so does the likelihood of one failing, which makes it very challenging to reliably increase qubit counts in a quantum processor. Currently, the 2 biggest companies working on quantum computers are Google and IBM. Over the past decade or so, both tech giants have poured hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in an attempt to develop quantum computers. In 2019, Google claimed to have achieved something called quantum supremacy for the first time ever. Quantum supremacy means a quantum computer can do something a classical computer cannot do, at least not within a reasonable period of time. Specifically, Google claimed its quantum computer did something in 200 seconds that it would take a state-of-the-art supercomputer 10,000 years to do the same thing. Here's a short clip of Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai explaining the achievement.
They've demonstrated with the quantum computer that it can perform a computation in seconds what would take the world's fastest supercomputer years, thousands of years to do that same calculation. And in the field, this is known as quantum supremacy, and it's a really important milestone.
On the surface, this sounds very impressive. IBM, which is one of Google's largest competitors, quickly disputed the claim. They said they could perform the same calculation on a supercomputer in just 2.5 days. But whether it takes 2.5 days or 10,000 years really misses the point. Even if Google's 10,000-year claim is correct, the so-called quantum supremacy is a lot less impressive than it sounds. To even call Google's quantum device a computer is a stretch, because it really didn't compute anything. All it did was sample an instance of a quantum circuit 1 million times. Remember that the qubits exist in a state of superposition, being both on and off at the same time. But as soon as you observe them, they collapse into zeros and ones at certain probabilities. Google set the probabilities of the qubits to a certain distribution, and sampled them to empirically test what results it will yield. They did this 1 million times. They effectively generated 1 million random numbers based on a very complex quantum distribution. Because the nature of quantum mechanics is very complicated, it is very difficult for a classical computer to simulate random numbers from a similar distribution. If you believe IBM, it would take a supercomputer 2.5 days. If you believe Google, it would take 10,000 years. But it would not be accurate to say that the quantum computer is more powerful than the classical computer. They are doing different things. All the quantum computer is doing is observing its own qubits, while the classical computer has to simulate what the qubits would do. So it's really not comparable. You might ask, what is the practical use case of sampling qubits 1 million times? The answer is absolutely nothing. The Google quantum computer cannot do anything useful. The quantum supremacy was purely a demonstration to show that they can indeed manipulate the qubits and observe them. The inherent fragility of qubits makes scaling up quantum computers very difficult. But even if you can create a quantum computer with tens or even hundreds of thousands of qubits, it's not immediately clear what you would use it for. There's a lot you can do with a regular computer today. You can write Word documents and browse the web. More powerful computers can render complex graphics for video editing or video games. The billions of transistors on the CPU can perform massive quantities of calculations at extremely fast speeds. Everything is expressed in zeros and ones, and there is no uncertainty. So when you're clicking around on your computer, it will never make mistakes. Assuming no software issues, the computer always does exactly what you tell it to do 100% of the time. Due to the inherent uncertainty of quantum mechanics, a quantum computer will never be able to operate, say, a web browser or a video game. The day-to-day things you do on your laptop will never be done on a quantum computer. The main theoretical use cases of quantum computers are generating random numbers and simulating quantum phenomena. So what can a quantum computer actually achieve in the real world? One of the most talked about use cases of quantum computing is breaking internet encryption. Today, almost all encrypted messages sent over the internet are encrypted using a method called RSA encryption. Here's how it works. Every individual has a private key which consists of 2 prime numbers. You multiply the 2 numbers together to create a public key which is made visible to everyone. Let's say you want to send someone a message, like a text file for example. There's a specific function you apply to your message that uses the intended recipient's public key as one of the inputs. You do not need to know the recipient's private keys, you only need to know their public key. After applying this function, the contents of the message are transformed into something nonsensical. The recipient receives this encrypted message. The recipient can apply a different function to the encrypted message to decipher it. This function uses his or her private keys as an input. You can only decipher the message with the private keys. The beauty of RSA encryption is that you can use a public key to encrypt the message, but you can only use the private keys to decipher it. This way, the sender does not need to know the recipient's private keys. If a hacker intercepts the message, he would have no way to decipher it because he doesn't know the intended recipient's private keys. Theoretically, it is possible for a hacker to guess someone else's private keys. They just need to find the 2 unique prime factors of the public key. In this example, if you see that someone's public key is 51,811, you can guess and check until you find that the two private keys must be 197 and 263. In practice, the keys are so large that it would take thousands of years for even a supercomputer to guess the prime factors. Because of this, RSA encryption is for all practical purposes impenetrable. In 1994, the mathematician Peter Shor developed something called the Shor's algorithm. By using Shor's algorithm, a sufficiently advanced quantum computer could theoretically be used to guess the prime factors of very large numbers, thereby breaking RSA encryption. Shor's algorithm is very complex and beyond the scope of this video, but if you're interested, the YouTuber Veritasium has a video that explains it in great detail. The link is in the description below. To be clear, no quantum computer that exists today is capable of breaking RSA encryption. It's just theoretically possible that a sufficiently advanced quantum computer could do this at some point in the future. Let's assume hypothetically that a company, after investing billions of dollars, eventually makes a quantum computer capable of breaking RSA encryption. What would you actually do with it? How would you generate revenue? Unless you're a cybercriminal, it's not immediately clear what you would do with this capability. National intelligence agencies could potentially want to use such a tool to intercept secret communications of foreign adversaries, but there is reason to doubt that quantum computers will ever be a significantly useful intelligence collection tool. Aware of the potential threat from quantum computers, most large governments have already started shifting to new encryption methods for sensitive communications. The US government is already in the process of transitioning to new encryption methods that cannot be compromised by quantum computers. Importantly, you do not need a quantum computer of your own to develop or implement quantum-proof encryption. If any government tried to develop a quantum computer for the purpose of gathering intelligence on their adversaries, by the time they develop this capability, it is likely to have already become obsolete. To fund their operating losses, quantum computing companies need to raise capital from investors. They must convince investors that quantum computing will have revolutionary use cases that will create hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of value. There's a publicly traded quantum computing company called IonQ. Here's a short clip of their CEO explaining the awesome potential of quantum computing.
And that's really the promise of quantum computing, is this massive amount of parallelism that allow us to tackle some of these significant problems, like chemistry, maybe find a cure for cancer, global climate change.
So apparently, quantum computing is a magical new technology that will cure cancer and solve global climate change. Maybe it can also turn iron into gold. Let's start off with the curing cancer argument. In the development of new drugs, scientists often need to see how various chemicals interact with each other. This can be done experimentally or simulated on computers. The interactions of some molecules may be so complex that they cannot be simulated even on the most advanced of supercomputers. Because some molecules exhibit quantum properties, it could be useful to try to simulate them with a quantum computer. How are quantum computers going to solve climate change? Theoretically, you could maybe use a quantum computer to run simulations of various chemicals and find new chemistries to create more efficient batteries for electric vehicles. But how realistic is any of this? Today, the most advanced quantum computers in the world can generate random numbers. We're a long way from breaking RSA encryption, let alone simulating biochemical reactions to cure cancer. The main issue holding back the development of large-scale quantum computers today is the issue of decoherence. As we discussed earlier, the qubits are extremely sensitive to their environment, such as heat or electromagnetic noise. A slight outside interference can disrupt a qubit, causing the system to break down. It is very difficult to detect and fix these errors. Remember that each qubit exists in a superposition, being both 1 and 0 at the same time. Once you observe the qubit, it collapses to either 0 or 1. This disrupts the other qubits that it is entangled with, and the entire calculation fails. There are solutions to this. You can do something called quantum error correction. You bunch your physical qubits into groups to form logical qubits. There are ways to indirectly observe the qubits and correct for decoherence on the level of the logical qubit. But to do this, you may need hundreds or even thousands of physical qubits in each logical qubit. The point is, if you want to make a quantum computer capable of doing anything useful, you will need a lot of qubits. Current estimates say that you would need 20 million qubits to break RSA encryption. If you want to cure cancer or solve global climate change, you would need orders of magnitude more than this. Today, the largest quantum computers have about 1,000 qubits, so we're multiple orders of magnitude away from achieving anything useful. The bulls say that quantum technology has already been proven. If the industry continues making advances, they will eventually be able to do something useful. However, there are well-respected academics who think that a useful quantum computer is not possible even in theory. The most notable of these skeptics are the Israeli math professor Gil Kalai and the Russian physics professor Mikhail Dyakonov. They both argue that quantum bits are inherently unstable. As the number of qubits increases, the number of quantum states increases exponentially. This level of complexity makes a sufficiently large quantum computer impossible to control, even in theory. To be clear, Dr. Kalai and Dr. Dyakonov are in the minority. The majority of researchers in the field argue that a quantum computer will one day be possible. There's a strong incentive for academics to be optimistic. Many academics have dedicated decades of their lives to study quantum computing. If you come out and say this was all a waste of time, that wouldn't exactly be good for your funding or career prospects. Many commentators often talk about useful quantum computers being 3 or 5 years away. I personally don't take these predictions very seriously. Let's use the analogy of flying machines. The first hang glider was invented in 1891. 124 years later, the F-35 entered service. Both devices are heavier than air flying machines, but they are on a completely different technological level. Many scientific and technological breakthroughs were needed to get from the hang glider to the F-35. Similarly, today we have so-called quantum computers, which are capable of nothing useful. The difference between the quantum computers of today and one that can do anything useful could be just as great. The inventor of the hang glider couldn't fathom what technology is necessary to make a supersonic stealth fighter jet. The quantum researchers of today likely can't fathom what future technologies will be necessary to make a useful quantum computer. Thus, trying to predict a timeline is a fool's errand. The idea of quantum computers has been discussed by physicists since the 1970s. The first ever quantum computer was jointly created by researchers at IBM and various universities in 1998. The 1998 quantum computer could not perform any useful function. Nevertheless, it was hyped up by the media as proof that such a technology is possible and will one day revolutionize computing. 25 years and billions of dollars later, we're pretty much in the same place. Quantum computers technically exist, but they have yet to do anything useful. Quantum mechanics, and especially quantum computing, are extremely complex topics that are very difficult for lay people to understand. Even technology-focused journalists have at best a superficial grasp of these mind-bending subjects. Lay people hear about the superposition of quantum states, the fact that the quantum computer is lowered to temperatures below that of outer space, etc. They are easily enamored and assume that this must be some magical new technology with awesome implications. This has led to embarrassing and cringeworthy coverage in the media. For example, The Atlantic magazine ponders whether quantum computing could end free will, whatever that's supposed to mean, while McKinsey & Company says that quantum computing might just save the world. A number of companies have taken advantage of this popular hype to raise capital from the investing public. During the SPAC craze of 2020 and 2021, a number of quantum computing companies went public, raising hundreds of millions of dollars from investors. The largest of these companies is IonQ, which boasts a market capitalization of more than $3 billion. In the first half of 2024, IonQ generated $19 million of revenue, almost doubling versus the prior year. They also incurred an operating loss of more than $100 million. Throughout this video, we've said that today's quantum computers can't do anything useful. If quantum computers are useless, how is a quantum computing company able to generate $19 million of revenue? It's important to look at where the revenue is coming from. 75% of IonQ's revenue comes from just 2 customers. While they don't explicitly disclose who these customers are, we believe that the second largest customer is the University of Maryland, which is a related party. The largest customer is almost certainly the US government. IonQ and other quantum computing companies have won large contracts from various US government agencies for the supply of quantum computers and related services. These government agencies aren't using quantum computers for any practical applications. They procure them for the purposes of research and experimentation. In 2018, Congress established a National Quantum Initiative, which allocated $1.2 billion to fund quantum-related research and development. This is where most of the funding comes from. Most politicians and bureaucrats lack a rigorous understanding of quantum computing. They are just as susceptible to fall for the hype as anyone else. In geopolitical circles, the quantum computing debate is typically framed as a competition between the United States and China. China is investing heavily in quantum computing. US policy circles fear that if China develops a useful quantum computer before the US, this could have profound economic and geopolitical consequences. Unsurprisingly, American quantum computing companies are eager to play up to the competitive threat from China, as they benefit directly from government funding. In the worst-case scenario, quantum computing is infeasible and the government wasted a few $1 billion funding pointless research. This is a tiny fraction of 1% of the government's budget. The exact same debate is happening in Beijing. They view this as another avenue to compete with the US. Thus, both countries are wasting billions of dollars to subsidize a technology that will likely amount to nothing. If you think about it, quantum computing is really the perfect hoax. Because a useful quantum computer does not exist, all the touted use cases are speculative and theoretical, so you can make up whatever you want. Quantum computers will cure cancer and solve global climate change. The quantum computing companies always claim to be on the verge of a big breakthrough, with revolutionary use cases just around the corner. Analysts on Wall Street are woefully unqualified to verify these technological claims and projections, so they largely go unchecked. And surely, it makes sense to invest a few $1 billion now to create $1 trillion of economic value by 2035, right? Of course, these numbers and timelines are fabricated out of thin air. Over the past 2 decades, tens of billions of dollars have been spent. Thousands of intelligent, albeit naive, physicists have dedicated their careers to something that may not even be possible. Perhaps the most absurd case of quantum malinvestment is a company called Zapata, which was founded by Harvard researchers in 2017. They aim to create software and algorithms for quantum computers. They were trying to create software when the hardware doesn't even work yet. Despite the absurdity of this business plan, they were able to secure tens of millions of dollars in venture capital funding. In March of 2024, they were even able to list their shares on the Nasdaq by merging with a SPAC. In October of 2024, just 7 months after listing its shares, Zapata announced that it was ceasing operations and laid off all of its employees. Companies like Zapata should never have been funded in the first place. Pretty much everyone involved in the industry, from academics to CEOs, all have an incentive to exaggerate the capabilities of quantum computers and downplay the challenges. Nobody has an incentive to stand up and say that the emperor has no clothes. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about quantum computing? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.